You got it locked on the best radio station.
GWA Radio.
You are listening to Diffusion of the Delusion on the GWOW Radio Network. And now your host, Randal Man. Yeah!
And thank you for that intro. I love that intro. A man did that for me here a while back. Sounds just like Christopher Walken and such a wonderful voice. You are listening to Diffusion of the Delusion Radio here on the GWA Radio Network. I'm Randal Mann, your host. We are simulcasting live on MixLR and on BTR tonight. Later, after the broadcast is over, we will be uploading these audio archives to Spreaker, where it'll be available on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes. Also, will be able to access it at www.gwaradio.com. Go over to the archive pages, Podbean. You can listen to this broadcast or all the other broadcasts that we've done in the past, and hopefully it'll be a blessing to you. Tonight, we're really excited. We've got a dear brother in Christ, Stan Deyo. He needs no introduction whatsoever. Everybody always talks about all these things. Stan's this and Stan's that and Stan's done this and Stan's done that. You know what? Stan's on with us tonight, and wherever the Lord leads us, we're going to talk about it. And without further ado, I'll invite him on. Stan, have I got you?
Yes, by the little toe, I think.
By the little. Well, I reached for the big one, but you're just too quick.
That's it. That's it. Even at this age, I'm too quick.
Well, awesome. It's always a blessing and a pleasure to have you on. I always have such a great time when I have you on and we talk. It's almost like we've got like 4, 5, 6 months between these visits that we have, and so much happens we can't catch up on it. And then by the time we get around to the next 5 or 6 month phase, there's so much more that's happened, and we're looking back and saying, well, isn't that something that Stan and I talked about like 5 months ago? So, I love to go back and listen to the archives when something comes up, especially earth changes or, expanding earth, or something that's going on with the magnetosphere, or something that's going on with Schumann resonance, any lightning storms, any of these kind of things. And then I'll listen back and I'll think, you know what, Stan talked about that a year ago. That's awesome. So I give God all the praise for that, because my memory is really short term these days.
Well, I suffer from that for sure. I can get introduced to somebody, and start talking to them, and 2 minutes later, I can't remember the name.
Oh, yeah.
I just wow. Anyway,
that's when everybody's hey you. It's just always hey you. You never worry about it, because I say hey you a lot. I deal with a lot of different people, answer a lot of emails. I'm sure you do too. And it gets to be okay. I know that person. I know that person. I know that person. I see their face, but I can't think of their name. So I've renamed people and let them know in the past. Okay, from now on, your name is Gary, or your name is David, or your name is this and that. And say, well, that's not my name. Well, that's what I'm going to call you. Because that's what you look. You look like that to me. So that's what we're going to do. But
oh well, okay, that works for me.
But I will call you Stan. I will always remember your name, Stan. You've got one of those names that kind of sticks out to me. You, L.A. There's a few people I can't forget your names. But I'm having L.A. on Friday night. He's going to talk about some of his stuff. I haven't talked to him in a coon's age too. But we were talking earlier before we get into what you wanted to talk about tonight, or whatever the Lord lays on your heart, about the crazy, wacky weather that's going on. I live in the Panhandle of Florida. Of course, you've been warning me to get out of here for years, and I'm always like, well, if that tidal wave hits, I'm just going to surf right on out of here. But I'm kind of like,
we say prudent places to live, but I mean, an asteroid could drop on somebody who thinks they're in a perfectly safe place.
That's right.
You minimize, don't be silly. Minimize your exposure to potential harm to you and your family, and after that, you trust the Lord to take care of the rest.
Absolutely, and I believe in the Lord dividing the water if that's His will, or if it's time for me to go. I'm not going to die till the Lord says I'm going to die anyway. So no matter what, you might see me on a surfboard. I'll make it on YouTube or something. I'll be the guy surfing on the tidal wave here. But it's the same thing with LA out there on the West Coast. I'm sure you've given him the same warning you've given me. Get out of there. But when you're with the Lord, when you're safe in the Lord's arms, it really doesn't matter where you're at. Right now, I'm exactly where I believe the Lord wants me. We're doing some great things with our ministry work. What we do here, we minister to a lot of people that really, really need it here. We are in the area where debauchery is like a way of life here for a lot of people.
Really?
So, oh yeah.
Wow.
You'd be surprised. Of course, all you got to do is look at anything on spring break, and you'll see it. So, it's getting a little better in a lot of ways, but we've noticed it with the youth, especially. The youth are really, this generation is just really so lost and so messed up and don't know where to turn, and they're being led in so many different directions, and I guess. When you're like me, when we were growing up, we knew what was going on. Our moms and our dads made sure, and every adult had permission to correct us when we were wrong. But now, the way children are now, you can't correct them, and we know what generation this is, don't we, brother?
We do, and it's the last generation, and the millennials, they call them. I mean, when I was a lot younger, and my daughter was a teenager around 12 or 13. She turned from my darling little princess into a monster, and ran off for a couple of days with her friends to some boy's apartment having parties and whatever. Tracked her down, and she told me that I couldn't tell her to come home to her room, or I couldn't take her home because the United Nations had given children the right to disenfranchise themselves from their parents. They didn't have to honor us, and they would give them an apartment and pay for it. And that was down in Australia. And my jaw nearly hit the floor. That kind of nonsense was being spread through the schools, and of course it was true.
Well, Hillary Clinton says it takes a village, but that's not what my father tells me in his word. I mean, it doesn't take a village. It takes a strong father and a strong mother to raise a child. You don't leave that up to the village.
This is true, and I might add, her argument had no weight because I grabbed her by both shoulders, lifted her straight up near and put her in the car and took her home. And eventually things patched over, and she grew up and met a nice young fella and has given me a couple of granddaughters, and they now own 2 or 3 businesses they started. And you just got to do it. You got some tough love is there.
But you did it. And if you hadn't have done it, who knows where she would be right now? Sometimes you just got to stand up and say, "No, I'm the dad, and you're the daughter, and I brought you in this world, and I will take you out." But but you can't do that anymore. You can't say that anymore. I mean, the day that I was born, my dad planted a weeping willow tree. He did that because my mom was going to send me to that willow tree for the rest of the whole time I was living in her house. I made many trips to that willow tree when I was growing up. And he always told me that story. The day was you born, I planted that willow tree, and it grew up right beside you, and those switches were for you, son. So, those are the days, but, those are the days, too, that they rolled up the streets on Sunday. Pretty much noon on Saturday, they rolled up the streets. Everybody went to church. If you didn't do anything that wasn't right, then you did it in the dark, and nobody knew about it or found out about it. It wasn't all this kinds of garbage that we see on the mainstream television now. I mean, you turn on television now, it's no telling what you're going to see.
Well, I know. It's just totally gross from what it was. I know that my mom was raised that way, spare the rod, spoil the child, Southern Baptist. And willow branches they sting when you got shorts on. They really sting. But anyway, as I got a bit older and taller as a teenager, on the odd occasion, and it very much was the odd occasion, she might tell me to take the trash out. You forgot to do it today, while I was in the middle of something that I didn't want to be interrupted, like studies or whatever. And one of those times I back-chatted her. I'm not taking that trash out. I'm busy. Well, she disappeared from the room for a second, came back with a little stool because she was shorter than I was by that time. And she had the switch, and she stood on it, and she says, "Young man, I'm never too short to discipline you." I took the trash out.
That's right. I mean, we feared our parents. We truly did. We feared any adult because where I grew up, every adult had permission to whip my behind if I needed it. In those days, you didn't have to worry about somebody doing something to a kid because somebody did something to a kid. Then every man in the town would get a hold of that guy, and you wouldn't have to worry about him doing anything to a kid anymore. I mean,
that's true.
We grew up in a time that my grandfather's my hero. The man, he loved the Lord more than any man I've ever known in my life. He preached to trees, Stan. He would go out, and I walked out there. I said, "Paul, what are you doing?" One day he was out there preaching, and he was standing in front of the tree. He said, "The Lord said, preach to every living creature, and I'm preaching to this tree." So,
okay.
and I said, well, Pa, if that's what you feel like you need to do, and he was a pillar in his church. He was just, during his eulogy, he had two different preachers do a eulogy for him at his funeral, and his name was Clarence. And one of the preachers said, I asked Clarence one day, why don't you own your own home? You own your own vehicle. You make good money. You always give it all away. You give it to the church. You give it to this person. You give it that. You always live in somebody else's house. You're always driving somebody else's vehicle. Why don't you take care of yourself? And he said, well, why do I want a mansion on earth why do I want a shack on earth when I'm going to have a mansion in heaven? And that's truly how he lived his life. He was my hero. He was my hero, and there were a lot of those old pillars, those Southern Baptist pillars. He was a Southern Baptist. He was just a pillar in the church, and I'm not going to get into that denominationalism and all that stuff because I don't believe in it. But they all loved the Lord. They didn't just talk the walk; they walked the talk too. So
where I came from, I stayed with my grandparents, the Southern Baptist, Grandpa and Grandma Akerd, and Grandpa Tobe was. Had formerly been the sheriff of Valley Mills, Texas. A whole population of 1,200, but everybody respected him, and Thelma, my grandmother, and they had a cafe as well. And I got to meet a lot of very interesting people and learned a lot about life while I stayed with him during the summers after that. But I'm very proud of him. Holly will tell you. I often say he's my role model too.
Yeah, it's great to have those role models, and it bothers me because I look to see who the role models for our children are today. Their role models are these pop stars or these movie stars or the politicians. Their role models are, even their teachers. We when we went to school, usually we had one teacher. For maybe even when we get to high school, we had several teachers, of course, because we had different classes. But now you don't know. Our kids don't spend any time with their parents. They get up, they hit the road in the morning. The parents do, because man and woman have to work to make it in this world anymore. And then the kids are being raised by only the Lord knows who. They're getting these values from someone else. I mean, right down the Common Core curriculum. This, I call it Obamacare, but right down that Common Core curriculum that is satanic to me. And I've done broadcasts and a lot of research on this whole thing with the Common Core and the 10 plagues of communism and all these other things. They're going hand in hand with what's going on right now in Turkey with Erdogan and these other things that are coming. And of course, you know what I'm talking about, but before we go into that, if we even get into that, I'm really intrigued by your study of Atlantis.
We didn't get to talk about that too much, did we, last time?
No, we didn't. We talked just a little bit about it, and then we got sidetracked like is always going to happen with me. We're always going to go all over the place.
Well, okay, just let me make a note of something here so we don't forget it later. Later, I want to talk to you about some changes in most of the planets and our moon and stuff, and the sun that have been occurring. They've been doing stats on it. I think they're quite interesting. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you a video link where you can send people to watch it.
Okay.
It's really quite interesting. I agree with most of the stuff. I've checked it, spot checked it here and there. It's only about 9 minutes long. But I'm just
I've noticed myself, and I watch a lot of the stuff with space weather and other things like that, and I really watch what's going on with like Schumann's resonance and what's going on in the ionosphere and what's going on with the polarities and these kinds of things. And there are some things changing, even the weather patterns being changing. Like I live in right off the Gulf of Mexico, and we see weather that we should be getting right now that's happening over in the Pacific. So
yeah, it's like several months out of sync.
It's like it's shifted when we're seeing tornadoes in Toronto, and things like that. So
Okay, well now let me get to Atlantis. I want to let's get some meat to the discussion here. For people that are listening, if you can't get to a computer later, go to standeyo.com, STANDEYO.com, and click on scroll down about a quarter of a page, something like that, and you'll